Welcome on in, golf fans. It's your boy Gsluke with our course preview for this week's John Deere Classic. Gonna get you guys ready for TPC Deere Run, everything to expect about the venue so that you have the research you need to get your process started and hopefully add on top of what was a massive week last week with us hitting a massive top 5 on Aldrich Pot Guider. So the research last week was dialed in. Let's see if we can keep it rolling here. Gonna cover on all the details with TPC Deere Run, including some of the course details, a hole by hole breakdown to show you exactly the shots required around here, and then afterwards my modeling and key stats that I'm using to try and find those diamonds in the rough. So a lot to go through here. It's not wasting any time at all, but first off, some of those course details and how this track is going to play. Just like last week's Rocket Classic, this is going to be a birdie fest, and maybe a little different because it's a par 71, but still get to see a winning score close to 20, maybe even better than 20 under par. So slightly different, a little bit shorter than the Rocket Classic. Also true bent grass greens instead of that bent POA, but the agronomy very similar across the board. I mean, the rough is almost the exact same, almost the same size greens as well. So a lot of similarities from golf course to golf course. So not a surprise that when we get to the comp courses later, that the Rocket Classic is going to be one of those comps, but the architect here would be a DA Weibring back in 2000, so a relatively new golf course, but one that we've seen on tour pretty much since its inception. So we have a really big sample size of what to expect around here, and overall, this is a short positional birdie fest sort of golf course. So most of your averages are easier than your PGA Tour average, including your fairway rate, which is about 6% higher than usual. Your green average also about 6% higher than what we're used to seeing. You see less three putts around here, more birdies, less bogeys per round than your PGA Tour average, which you'd expect at a course where the winning score gets so low. And kind of like the Rocket Classic as well, you don't have to be a bomber to find success, as it is a pretty short golf course at only about 7,300 yards, but the approach distribution skews a little bit longer than the Rocket Classic, which is partially because of some of the layups that you have off the tee. You might not hit driver on all 14 holes like you did in Detroit. Here they have 11 out of the 14 holes as driver holes, and your approach distribution skews a little bit longer from 125 to 175. So, a pretty similar track from week to week, but a few nuances as you would expect. The putting rates are a little bit easier than your PGA Tour average, and if you take a look at the around the green distribution around Deere Run, you're going to have shots across all the different surfaces. So it's, I would say, not a big change from week to week, which is kind of what you get during these Midwest swings. And when we go hole by hole, let's show you the kind of shots that are required around here. Hole 1 going to be a 400-yard par 4, so slight dogleg from right to left. And this is an example of a layup hole because even if you take a driver, you're still going to have a wedge in. If you lay up to the corner, you're at most going to have a 9-iron, probably a pitching wedge for a vast majority of these players. And if you take the driver, it gets a little bit more narrow down there. So that's why this course, you can see a variety of different types of players succeeding. As bombers, that definitely helps out on the drivable 4s and the par 5s, but your shorter players can excel in these more positional holes. Hole 2, an example where that power pays off, because the longer you are, the more you can cut off this corner, and you're going to have even some elite tier players that get it close to this little cart path out there, which is like a 400-yard drive. So one of the easier holes out here. Everything does slope from this right side to the left side, so the angle off the tee is a little awkward, but if you hit it in the short stuff, you're going to have less than 250 in. Next up, we have 3, which is a 186-yard par 3. It's a medium length par 3, relatively small green, would probably be the hardest part about it, but a back right pin location can be a little tricky. Hole 4 is 456. This is a slight dogleg from left to right, and yeah, that's a massive tree that they have in the middle of the fairway. So outside of the massive tree, it's a pretty straightforward part 4. Yeah, most players are going to lay up at this hole, probably not take driver. If you do, though, you have a massive landing area, so some of your more powerful players may go ahead and choose to, force it up there a little bit further, but still going to be a very scoreable hole even if you lay back. Hole 5 is 435, so a slight dogleg from left to right. You do have to lay up here as the fairway ends at about 300 yards, but a wedge shot in, especially if you can hit the short stuff. And, your longer players aren't going to be hitting 3-woods here, probably irons off the tee. So though power on the more positional holes isn't as much of a factor, it does mean that you can hit irons off the tee, and you're probably not going to miss many fairways when you do so. Hole 6 is 370, another one of these layup par 4s, one where you just can't hit driver pretty much no matter what. 7 is 226, so a longer par 3, a lot longer than the first one that we saw, but the green is larger as well, so it does take away some of that difficulty having a larger landing area. 8 is 433, so a pretty straightforward par 4. This is one where you could hit driver conceivably, but you don't have to, because even if you lay back your back a bit, you're still going to have about 140 in. 9 is 505 yards. This is the hardest hole, at least for my money, at this golf course. Over 500 yards for a par 4 would be pretty difficult anywhere, but it is wide open off the tee. So more of the difficulty comes in on the second shot, where this green is a lot smaller than most 500-yard par 4s, but it's a relatively straightforward green complex, very flat, not of undulation and not a lot of speed that you have at 9. Starting on 10, you do get a par 5 if you're starting on the back. It is 600 yards, though, so not everyone is going to be able to reach in 2. You certainly have to hit the short stuff, though, because of the water on the right. Players aren't going to take on that kind of risk out of the rough. 11 is 429, so this is a straightforward, another layup par 4. You could technically hit driver here, but you're going to get close to the end of the fairway, and just like some of the other more positional holes, you don't have to bang it out there to have a wedge. Like if you hit iron, a 3-wood off the tee here, you're still going to have at most a pitching wedge in. 12 is 212, so another longer par 3. Just like the other long par 3, though, the green is a little bit larger to compensate for it. 13 is 421. This is a straightforward par 4. You could hit driver here, and in fact, if you hit driver, it does take these right side bunkers out of play, so I think you will see more aggressive play at 13 compared to some of the other shorter par 4s, just because they give you some room to hit the big stick if you want. 14 is 358. This is one of the drivable par 4s. Some of them can be drivable depending on wind direction, also whether they move up the tee boxes, but pretty much no matter what, this is going to be drivable playing way downhill. So though it is 360, it plays closer to like 330, 325 to the front, which is doable for a lot of the field. 15 is 481, so a pretty straightforward but long par 4. You do hit driver here because the landing area is one of the widest fairways on the property, and that length is nice on a nearly 500-yard hole. 16 is your shortest of the par 3s. It's also the largest of the greens that you have on the par 3s. So this is by far the easiest. And you don't want to sleep on it, though, because these left side pin locations can be problematic. This slope here that doesn't look so bad, I mean, you can see the kind of shrubs that are down there, is extremely steep. And we've even seen players that have hit that slope and ended up in the water down below. So I know it looks like it's not really in play, but we've seen some crazy stuff at 16 before. 17 is your last par 5. This is a very reachable par 5 as well, being less than 570 yards. So expect to see a lot of players, pretty much almost the whole field that hits the fairway, go for that one with their second shot. And then finally, 18 is 472. This is a dogleg from left to right par 4. And this is probably the hardest or the second hardest hole. 9, the other finisher on the front 9, is also extremely difficult. But you do have water down the left here that can lead to some big numbers. So overall, you're looking at a very scoreable golf course. A few holes where you have to hold on, mostly 9 and 18. But the par 5s all reachable into some drivable par 4s. And then even your run-of-the-mill par 4s, which are those 400-yard par 4s, you're going to have a wedge in hand most of the times. That's why when we get to the model here, you can see us focusing on so many of those scoring stats, because this is a golf course where 20 to 25 under par is at the very least going to be what you need to win. So the first 4 stats that I have in the modeling are just your core 4 shots gained metrics, your off the tee approach around the green, and your putting, which you can never completely ignore when doing a handicapping process, because form heading in is always extremely important when you're handicapping. So the one thing I will say is that the approach play is by far the most important stat category that I have weighed. Off the tee and putting, a little bit close behind, but around the green play, next to no importance in my modeling. You know, if you're missing greens around a John Deere Classic, that's a problem to begin with. So taking a look at guys that can scramble, not as useful around this kind of track. So you're off the tee poppers, they're always going to get a bump in the modeling, but you guys can see some of the top poppers right there. Approach play, same thing. You can also find some of your top approach players heading in, and they could be worth a few extra looks. But the stats that tend to get a lot more interesting on a week like this would be things like birdie or better percentage, because to encapsulate that upside, try and find players that can shoot a low score. We want guys that can post a whole bunch of birdies. So, you know, your PGA Tour regulars are the ones that I would really focus on here, like your Thor Bjornsons, your Michael, Keith Mitchells, I should say, also a Mark Hubbard. Not so much the guys that are on the DP World Tour, like a Dylan Fratelli or an Aaron Wise that's only played a few times over the last month or so, you're more so looking for guys that not only fit this birdie or better list, but also are checking some of the form boxes heading in. So for example, that's why a Thor and a Keith Mitchell are both top 6 in the modeling. A Mark Hubbard is number 8 in this week's modeling. You're looking for legit PGA Tour players that are not only playing well, but are also outscoring their placement position. So for example, a Matt McCarty is that exact type of player. A Cam Champ has been playing solid golf recently, also posting a lot of birdies or better. Could be a good fit around a John Deere Classic. And I also like to look at your bent grass putting. That, of course, is the surface of the week, the type of grass around TPC Deere Run. So taking a look at players that excel on that type of grass could always be useful. So Dylan Fratelli gaining over 1.25 shots gained putting per round. Haven't seen him that much on the PGA Tour, though, so take that with a grain of salt. More so the players that really stand out to me would be your Vince Whaley's, Quade Cummins, who's played a lot on the PGA Tour this year, Takumi Kanaya, Cameron Champ showing up once again. And I got to say, he's played really well at some of the comp courses I'm looking at too. So Cam Champ might be one of the plays that I have to sprinkle on in that 7-8K range. A little bit further down, your Ben Griffins, Ricky Fowlers also excel on this type of grass, along with a Sam Stevens, a Sammy Velamaki, and a Denny McCarthy. So all worthy of a little bit of a boost in your modeling. And then the last 2 categories I'm looking at as well would be your approach play from 125 to 175. That's going to be by far the most prominent range this week. So if we're looking at guys like a Grillo towards the top, there's a reason why he models so well here. High birdie or better percentage, really good driving accuracy as well, which we'll talk about just in a second. But players that can consistently gain from 125 to 175 are also going to get a boost in my model. So Ben Coles, Rio Hisatuni kind of stands out. Rico Hoey's also been good with the mid irons. And of course, last year's champion Davis Thompson, this is where he's really stood out lately. So a good thing that we're adding that in on there, considering the kind of success that he had here last year. And then also driving accuracy percentage. And, you know, it's not a really big part of my modeling. I kind of just threw it on there at the end to round it out. But if there's one portion of your off the tee play that I think is a little bit more important, it might be that driving accuracy. Just because the shorter par fours, there are so many of them, it is that accuracy over that distance. And the par fives, outside of maybe one of them, are going to be reachable for everyone in the field. So when you put it all together, give you guys an idea of the top plays of the week. We've got Ben Griffin as a pure 10 out of 10. Same thing with Cam Champ and Emiliano Grillo and Andrew Putnam. And I like to see that it's a variety of different players. We've got short guys like Putnam, one of the shortest players on tour. We've got Grillo, who's a second shot specialist. We've got Cam Champ, the bomber off the tee. And then, of course, Ben Griffin, who's playing like Scotty Scheffler over his last few months that you would expect to see up there because of the kind of form that he has. So, you know, a good mix of different skill sets that can play well around here, and good to see that our modeling is giving us that kind of variety. And, you know, outside of that, we got Thor Bjornsson, another bomber, Rory, Keith Mitchell also that hit the ball a long way, but not so much with your guys like a Mark Hubbard, your Matt McCarty's, you know, of the world, that especially a Henrik Norlander or Chandler Phillips that aren't super long off the tee, where we're just finding high upside players that fit these birdie fest style of events. And that's what I'm going with for this sort of a week. So you guys will see in my DFS and betting preview a little bit later on this evening, it's going to be a lot of the players that we see towards the top there. Then our comp courses I'm mixing in would be, first off, Detroit Golf Club, the home of the Rocket Classic. Already mentioned multiple times throughout this that it's going to be very similar from week to week. So taking a look at this week's leaderboard could prove fruitful, but a lot of the same kind of shots on approach, a lot from 175 and in. Also, you don't have to hit driver all the time around the Rocket Classic. So whether it's this year, taking a look at the leaderboard from just yesterday, or even over the last few seasons, I think that could be helpful. Also, the 3M Open. So this is another par 71, a little bit longer than this week, but another course where you see a lot of birdies, a little bit more water variance around the 3M, but still a very similar kind of skill set across courses. A few more shots from 175 to 225 there, but you can see the second most prominent category is this 125 to 175 yard range, which is very similar to what we get at this event. Drivers stats, you can see it's not a bomber's paradise, just like we have at the John Deere. So if you want to look at 2024, some of the stats from the year before that as well, I think that could also be useful. And then the last one I have is the one with the smallest sample size, and that would be the Truist Championship from this year, the Philadelphia Cricket Club, another shorter par 70. So not the par 71 for this week, but the same kind of approach profile that we have at this event, where 125 to 175 is by far the most valuable asset. And then I know they don't have the driving bias on here yet, but it was definitely a course where you didn't have to be a bomber. You could just see that with the leaderboard. You did have some bombers showing up because it's a signature field event, but any event where Sepp Straka wins, who by the way has also won at the John Deere Classic, is an event where you don't have to be a bomber. So those are a few comp courses, the modeling for this week to try and find some of our top plays. Alrighty guys, that is all I've got for this week's course breakdown. Smash the like button if you guys haven't already, and also subscribe to the channel so you guys don't miss any of the content to come, which will of course include our DFS and betting preview a little bit later on this evening, going through everything to expect on Draftkings, my core plays and value plays, as well as any outright bets that I'm adding to the mix. And after that big pot guider top 5 bet that we cashed out, let's try and run it back for this week. So I'm stoked to get into it, excited for all the content to come. That'll of course include our Wednesday live stream at 7 p.m. Eastern time on the Ship It channel, 8 p.m. Eastern time on my YouTube channel on Wednesday, going through all the prop stuff too, and to the rounds 2 through 4 showdown and 2 through 4 prop streams that we have for this week. This is by far the busiest channel that we have in PGA DFS. So if you guys haven't already, subscribe to the channel so you guys can catch all that content when it drops. What are you guys waiting for? But outside of that, best of luck with all the exposure that you guys are getting to this week. Also throw your winning score prediction down below, and if you guys end up getting the winning score prediction first, it'll be on a first come first serve basis. You will win a free month access to my Patreon page, which is not only where you can find all my content for these events, but spreadsheets showing all the DraftKings and all the modeling and projections for any given golf tournament, prop stuff for rounds 2 through 4 on Underdog and Prize Picks, as well as matchups on the sports books, all for free if you guys can give me that winning score. So go ahead, claim your score before anyone else steals it from you. Best of luck with everything that you guys are going with.